The chamber is electric, every eye fixed on the dais. Mike Johnson's voice slices through the tension, each word sharpened by years of practiced authority. "Let's be honest about what's really going on here," declares, his gaze sweeping the room, daring anyone to challenge him. "Some people in this chamber have built their entire careers on division, on spectacle, on playing the victim. And frankly, the American people deserve better." A hush falls. The camera lingers on Jasmine Crockett, her expression unreadable, her posture unshaken. She doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. Around her, colleagues shift in their seats, some smirking, others bracing for impact. Johnson's words hang in the air, heavy with accusation. "Congresswoman Crockett," he continues, his tone dripping with condescension, "perhaps you'd like to explain to the American people what you've actually accomplished." Besides stirring up outrage and chasing headlines, a ripple of discomfort moves through the chamber. Crockett's name echoes, a challenge and a provocation. Johnson leans forward, his voice lowering to a theatrical whisper. "Because from where I'm sitting, all I see is someone who talks a big game but delivers nothing. Someone who's more interested in being a celebrity than a servant of the people." The room is silent, the tension almost unbearable. Cameras flash. Phones are raised, ready to capture whatever comes next. Crockett's eyes never leave Johnson's. She is the picture of composure, her silence louder than any outburst. The audience at home can feel the stakes. This isn't just a political spat. It's a battle for dignity, for identity, for the right to belong. Johnson sits back. Satisfied, convinced he's landed the final blow. But the silence that follows is not surrender, it's the calm before a storm. Crockett's lips part, just slightly, as if she's about to speak. The world leans in, breath held, waiting for her response. But no one in that room or across America was prepared for what Jasmine Crockett would do next. This was not just another day in Congress. The air in the chamber was thick with more than just political rivalry. It was the weight of history pressing down on every word, every glance, every accusation. America was watching, but not just for the spectacle. They were watching because, in this moment, the very soul of the country was on trial. Outside these walls, the nation was restless. Protests echoed through city streets, voices demanding justice, dignity, and a seat at the table. The old guard clung to power, their grip tightening with every challenge to the status quo. For decades, figures like Mike Johnson had written the rules, drawn the boundaries, and decided who got to speak and who was told to wait their turn. He was the face of tradition, confident, unyielding, certain that his way was the only way. To him, the chamber was a fortress, and he was its gatekeeper. But America was changing. The faces in the gallery, the voices on the streets, the millions watching from living rooms and break rooms and classrooms, they saw something different in Jasmine Crockett. She was not just another politician. She was a symbol of a new era, unapologetically black, fiercely proud, and unafraid to challenge the narrative. For every immigrant who had been told to go back, for every woman who had been talked over, for every young person who had been told to wait their turn, Crockett was a beacon. She carried their hopes, their frustrations, their dreams for a country that finally saw them. The stakes were more than personal. This was about who gets to define what it means to be American. Was it the polished, rehearsed certainty of the establishment? Or was it the raw, lived experience of those who had fought for every inch of progress? Johnson's attack was not just on Crockett's record. It was an attack on the idea that someone like her could ever belong, could ever lead, could ever win. And yet, as the world watched, the tension was not just about two politicians. It was about every family that had ever felt invisible, every community that had ever been told to keep quiet, every dream that had ever been deferred. The chamber became a stage for a much larger drama, the old America, desperate to hold on, facing the new America, rising and unafraid. The silence after Johnson's words was not just awkward, it was electric. It was the sound of a country at a crossroads, waiting to see which future would emerge. Would the old guard's arrogance go unchallenged? Or would a new voice, a new vision, finally break through? Because what happened in the next 30 seconds would send shockwaves far beyond the Capitol. It would ripple through social media, through dinner tables, through the very heart of the nation. But to understand the true weight of this clash, you have to know who these two really are. To understand the force Jasmine Crockett was up against, you have to step into the world of Mike Johnson, a world built on tradition, calculation, and a relentless pursuit of power. Johnson's story is not one of struggle, but of strategy. Born into comfort, he learned early that the rules of the game were written for people like him. He didn't have to break barriers. He just had to play his part, and play it well. From his first days in local politics, Johnson was a master of the backroom deal. He knew how to shake the right hands, say the right words, and when necessary, look the other way. His rise was steady, almost inevitable. He spoke the language of the establishment, measured, polished, always in control. To his supporters, he was a steady hand in turbulent times. To his critics, he was the embodiment of everything wrong with American politics. A man more interested in maintaining power than serving people, Johnson's record is a study in contradictions. He talks about unity, but his votes tell a different story. He calls for civility, but his speeches drip with thinly veiled contempt for those who challenge him. He claims to champion the Constitution, but only when it suits his agenda. Time and again, he stood in the way of progress, cloaking his resistance in the language of tradition and values. When the cameras are rolling, he's the picture of composure. But behind closed doors, colleagues whisper about his temper. His impatience with dissent, his willingness to bend the truth if it means winning the day. There are moments rare, but telling when the mask slips. In committee hearings, when pressed by younger, more diverse colleagues, Johnson's tone shifts. The condescension creeps in, the dismissiveness becomes palpable. He interrupts, he talks over, he belittles. It's not just disagreement. It's a performance of superiority, a reminder of who's supposed to be in charge. For Johnson, politics isn't just about policy, it's about hierarchy. It's about reminding everyone of their place. His controversial stances have made headlines, but not for the reasons he'd like. He's voted against expanding health care, against protecting voting rights, against measures that would make life easier for working families. When challenged, he pivots to talking points, deflects with platitudes, or blames the opposition for dividing the country. But the truth is, Johnson's career has been built on drawing lines as versus them, insiders versus outsiders, the deserving versus the rest. And yet, for all his talk of principle, Johnson's record is littered with double standards. He rails against government spending, but quietly secures funding for his own district. He decries identity politics, but never hesitates to play to his base's fears and resentments. He demands respect, but rarely gives it. The hypocrisy is not just frustrating, it's infuriating. For those who have watched him rise, it's a reminder that the system is rigged, that the rules are different for those who have always held the pen. But perhaps the most telling moments are the ones that never make the news. The closed-door meetings where Johnson dismisses concerns as overblown, the private jokes at the expense of colleagues who don't look or sound like him, the subtle, constant reminders that in his world, his power is not shared, it's hoarded. For years, Johnson has gotten away with it. The establishment protects its own, and he has mastered the art of survival. He's weathered scandals, sidestepped accountability, and emerged each time with his position intact. To many, he seems untouchable, a fixture of the old order, too entrenched to be moved. But beneath the surface, the frustration is building. People are tired of the arrogance, the double standards, the empty promises. They're tired of being told to wait, to be patient, to accept less. They're looking for someone who will call out the hypocrisy, who will refuse to play by the old rules. And on this day, in this chamber, Mike Johnson is about to face something he's never faced before, a challenge he can't dismiss, a voice he can't silence, a truth he can't spin. The world is watching, and for the first time, the old playbook might not be enough. But while Johnson built his career on power plays, Jasmine Crockett's journey was forged in fire. Jasmine Crockett's story doesn't begin in the marble halls of Congress. It begins in a small, bustling neighborhood where dreams were often deferred but never extinguished. She grew up in a world where every day was a lesson in resilience. Her mother worked double shifts, her father juggled odd jobs, and Jasmine learned early that nothing would be handed to her. She watched her parents stretch every dollar, sacrifice their own comfort, pour every ounce of hope into their children's future. In that home, dignity wasn't a word, it was a way of life. School was Jasmine's first battleground. She was the only black girl in her advanced classes, the one whose hand was always up, whose questions were met with rolled eyes or whispered jokes. Teachers praised her intelligence, but warned her not to be too outspoken. Classmates challenged her right to be there as if her presence was an accident, a clerical error in the system. But Jasmine refused to shrink. She studied harder, spoke louder, and learned to turn every slight into fuel. She carried her family's pride on her shoulders, and she wore her difference like armor. College was supposed to be a fresh start, but the challenges only grew sharper. She faced professors who doubted her, advisors who steered her away from ambition, and peers who saw her as a token. She worked nights to pay tuition, sent money home when she could, still found time to organize protests and volunteer at legal clinics. Every obstacle was a reminder. The world would not make room for her. She would have to carve out her own space. Law school was a crucible. Jasmine was one of a handful of women of color in her class, and the pressure was relentless. She was told to tone it down, to wait her turn, to be grateful for the opportunity. But she knew that silence was complicity. She spoke up in class, challenged professors, and demanded that the law serve everyone, not just the privileged few. She graduated with honors, but more importantly, she left with a mission: to fight for those who had been told to wait, be quiet, to accept less. Her career began in the trenches. As a public defender, Jasmine saw firsthand the cruelty of a system stacked against the poor, the black, the immigrant, the forgotten. She sat with mothers who couldn't afford bail, with teenagers facing decades behind bars for minor offenses, with families torn apart by policies written by people who would never know their names. She fought for every client as if they were her own family, because in so many ways they were. She lost cases she should have won cases she was told were hopeless, and earned a reputation as a fighter, relentless, compassionate, and unafraid. But the victories came at a cost. Jasmine faced threats, harassment, and relentless scrutiny. She was called angry, difficult, unprofessional, all the words used to put black women in their place. She was passed over for promotions, excluded from meetings, and told again and again that she didn't belong. But every setback only sharpened her resolve. She knew that her fight was bigger than her own career. She was fighting for every girl who had ever been told she was too much, every family who had ever been told they were not enough. When she ran for office, the odds were stacked against her. She had no wealthy donors, no powerful backers, no family name to open doors. What she had was a community that believed in her, a record of service, and a voice that refused to be silenced. She knocked on doors, listened to stories, and promised to bring those voices into the halls of power. Her campaign was dismissed as a long shot, a footnote in the political season. But Jasmine knew that underdogs don't just play the game, they change it. Her victory was more than a personal triumph. It was a message to every person who had ever felt invisible. You matter, you belong, and your voice can change the world. In Congress, Jasmine brought the same fire, the same compassion, the same refusal to accept the status quo. She challenged colleagues, demanded accountability, spoke truth to power even when it made her a target. But what truly set Jasmine apart was her composure. In the face of insults, she stood tall. When dismissed, she doubled down. She understood that every attack was not just about hurt, it was about everyone she represented. She carried the weight of her community, her ancestors, and every person who had ever been told to wait their turn. She turned pain into purpose, and purpose into power. And so, when Mike Johnson launched his attack, Jasmine Crockett was ready. She had faced worse. She had survived more. She knew that this moment was not just about her reputation, it was about the right to belong, to lead to define what it means to be American. She didn't just survive the attack, she made history. The chamber, already tense, seemed to shrink as Mike Johnson pressed his advantage. His words, once calculated, now dripped with a sharper edge. "Let's not pretend," he sneered, "that grandstanding and social media stunts are the same as real leadership. Congresswoman Crockett, you've made a career out of division. You've turned every disagreement into a spectacle. Is that what you think public service is?" A few of Johnson's allies exchanged knowing glances, their smirks barely concealed. They'd seen this play before, an old guard lion circling, ready to pounce. Crockett's supporters, meanwhile, shifted in their seats, eyes darting between her and Johnson, worry etched across their faces. Some clenched their fists, others whispered encouragement under their breath, but all of them felt the weight of the moment. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were personal. Johnson's voice rose, his frustration barely masked. "You talk about justice, but what have you actually delivered? You talk about the people, but all I see is someone obsessed with the spotlight. You're not here to serve, you're here to be seen." He gestured dismissively, as if brushing away a nuisance. The American people deserve substance, not sound bites. They deserve results, not rhetoric. The room was thick with anticipation. Every camera was trained on Crockett, every phone in the gallery recording, every viewer at home waiting for her to crack. Johnson leaned in, his tone growing colder. "You want to talk about sacrifice? About service? Tell us, Congresswoman, what have you sacrificed? What have you risked, besides your own reputation?" A hush fell. Even the usual chatter of aides and staffers faded into silence. Crockett's face remained impassive, her eyes locked on Johnson. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. The contrast was stark. Johnson red-faced and animated, his words tumbling over each other in a rush to wound. Crockett, still as stone, her composure unbroken. Her opponents watched with barely concealed glee. Convinced they were witnessing a takedown, they whispered to each other, certain that Crockett would finally be exposed, finally be put in her place. But her allies saw something different. They saw the set of her jaw, the calm in her eyes, the quiet strength that had carried her through storms far fiercer than this. Johnson, sensing victory, pressed on. "You claim to represent the people, but you don't speak for me. You don't speak for the millions of Americans who are tired of this circus. You're not a leader. You're a distraction." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, it seemed as if the old order had reasserted itself, as if the gatekeepers had slammed the door shut once more. The room was silent, the tension almost unbearable. Crockett's allies held their breath, her opponents waited for her to falter, and the audience at home leaned in, hearts pounding. But Crockett didn't falter. She didn't blink. She sat, perfectly poised, letting the silence stretch, letting Johnson's words echo and fade. The power in the room shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if everyone sensed that something was about to break, and then, with the nation watching, Jasmine Crockett leaned into her McCand. Everything changed. Jasmine Crockett's hand hovered over the microphone, her fingers steady, her gaze unwavering. The room was silent, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Johnson's words still hung in the air, but their power was already fading, replaced by a new electric anticipation. Crockett's allies watched, hope flickering in their eyes. Her opponents leaned forward, eager for a stumble. The nation waited. She drew a breath, slow and deliberate, letting the tension build. Then, with a voice as clear as glass, she began. "Congressman Johnson, I appreciate your concern for my career. It's always interesting to hear lectures on public service from someone who's spent more time protecting their own power than protecting the people." A ripple moved through the chamber, some gasps, some stifled laughter. Johnson's jaw tightened, but Crockett pressed on, her words measured, each one landing with precision. "You ask what I've sacrificed? Let me tell you. I've sacrificed sleep, safety, and certainty. I've walked into courtrooms where the odds were stacked against my clients and against me, and I fought anyway. I've stood up for families who had no one else to stand for them. I've risked my career, my reputation, and sometimes my life, because justice isn't just a word to midst a promise." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The cameras zoomed in, catching the flicker of doubt in Johnson's eyes. Crockett's voice softened, but her resolve only grew stronger. You say I'm obsessed with the spotlight. But the only reason there's a spotlight on me is because I refuse to let injustice hide in the shadows. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's because you're used to a world where people like me are supposed to stay quiet. A murmur swept through the chamber. On social media, the moment was already catching fire. Tweets flew. She's speaking for all of us. This is what courage looks like. Tags began to trend. Hashtag tagged clapback. Hashtag truth to power. Hashtag mic drop moment. Crockett leaned in, her eyes never leaving Johnson's. You talk about leadership. But real leaders don't tear people down to build themselves up. Real leaders listen. Real leaders serve. Real leaders know that their job is to open doors, not slam them shut. Johnson shifted in his seat, his confidence slipping. The smirks on his allies' faces faded, replaced by uncertainty. Crockett's allies sat up straighter, pride shining in their eyes. The audience at home could feel the shift. The underdog was no longer on the defensive. She was in control. Crockett continued, her voice rising with conviction. You want to talk about results? Let's talk about results. I've helped pass legislation that puts food on families' tables, that keeps kids in school, that gives people a second chance. I've worked with people who don't look like me, who don't agree with me. Because I know that progress doesn't come from division, it comes from unity. She paused again, letting the silence speak. The chamber was rapt, every eye fixed on her. Johnson looked away, his bravado crumbling. Crockett's words were not just a defense, they were an indictment. A mirror held up to the old guard's hypocrisy. On Twitter, the memes exploded. A split screen of Johnson's stunned face and Crockett's calm defiance. Gifs of mic drops, of fireworks, of crowds cheering. Commentators rushed to weigh in. This is a masterclass in composure. She just rewrote the rules. History in the making. Ack! Crockett's voice softened, but her words cut deeper. You say I don't speak for you. That's fine. I speak for the people who've been ignored, dismissed, and told to wait their turn. I speak for the families who can't afford to wait. I speak for the future you keep trying to hold back. A hush fell, deeper than before. Even Johnson's staunchest supporters were silent, their certainty shaken. Crockett's allies exchanged glances of awe, some blinking back tears. The audience at home felt it too, a surge of pride, of validation, of hope. Crockett finished, her voice steady and sure. You can attack my record, my motives, my very presence in this chamber, but you can't erase the truth. I am here. I belong here. And I will not be silenced, not by you, not by anyone. The chamber erupted not in chaos, but in a wave of energy. Some applauded, others sat in stunned silence. Johnson tried to recover, but the moment was gone. The power had shifted and everyone knew it. Outside the chamber, the world reacted in real time. News alerts flashed. Crockett's response goes viral. Influencers posted reaction videos, their faces lit up with excitement. Young people shared clips, adding their own stories of being underestimated, of fighting to be heard. The hashtags soared, the memes multiplied. And the message was clear. Something had changed. Commentators on both sides scrambled to respond. Some tried to downplay the moment, calling it just another debate. But the truth was undeniable. Crockett's words had cut through the noise, had reached beyond the walls of Congress, had spoken to a nation hungry for authenticity, for courage, for a new kind of leadership in living rooms and classrooms. In break rooms and on buses, people watched and rewatched the clip. They saw themselves in Crockett's calm, in her fire, in her refusal to back down. They felt the sting of Johnson's words. But they also felt the power of Crockett's responsive power that came not from anger, but from truth. As the echoes of her words faded, the chamber was stunned, but the real explosion was just beginning online. The moment Jasmine Crockett's words left her lips, the world outside the chamber erupted. Within seconds, the clip was everywhere on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and group chats from coast to coast. Hashtags blazed across screens. Hashtag Crockett clapback. Hashtag stand with Jasmine. Hashtag truth to power. The video racked up millions of views in minutes, each replay fueling a new wave of energy. Memes exploded into existence. One showed Crockett's poised face superimposed over a roaring lion. The caption, "Unbothered, unbreakable, unmatched," another looped Johnson's stunned reaction, paired with the words, "When the old guard meets the new." TikTokers reenacted the exchange, some with tears in their eyes, others with laughter, all with a sense of vindication. The internet had found its hero and its villain. Commentators scrambled to keep up. Progressive voices called it the moment the tables turned. Masterclass in dignity, the future of American leadership. Even some centrist pundits, usually cautious, admitted Crockett's composure was undeniable. She didn't just defend herself, she inspired a movement. On cable news, the clip played on a loop, anchors marveling at the clarity and force of her words. But the impact didn't stop at headlines or hot takes. In classrooms, teachers played the video, asking students what courage looks like. In community centers, organizers replayed the moment, using it to rally volunteers and remind them why their voices matter. Young activists posted their own stories tagging Crockett, thanking her for showing that you can stand tall, even when the world tries to cut you down. Marginalized voices found new strength. Immigrant families, long told to keep their heads down, shared the clip with pride. "She speaks for us," one mother wrote, her post going viral. "For every time we've been told to wait, to be quiet, to accept less today, we saw what's possible." Black and brown girls posted side-by-side photos, Crockett at the mic, themselves in classrooms, on stages, and boardrooms. "We belong," they wrote. "We are not afraid." Even some political opponents, caught off guard by the tidal wave of support, offered grudging respect. "You have to hand it to her," one conservative commentator tweeted. "She stood her ground. That's leadership, whether you agree with her or not." Others, less gracious, tried to spin the moment, but their words were drowned out by the sheer volume of praise. Meanwhile, Johnson faced a backlash he hadn't anticipated. His supporters tried to rally, but the narrative had shifted. Editorials questioned his tactics, late-night hosts lampooned his arrogance, and even some of his colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a losing fight. The old playbook, dismiss, belittle, move on, suddenly seemed outdated, powerless against the force of Crockett's authenticity. Celebrities joined the chorus. A-list actors tweeted their support, musicians dedicated songs to standing your ground, athletes wore shirts emblazoned with Crockett's words. The ripple effect was undeniable. What had started as a tense exchange in a congressional chamber had become a cultural moment, a rallying cry for anyone who had ever felt unseen. But the most powerful validation came from everyday people. A young woman in Detroit posted, "I watched that clip with my mom," she cried. "We've never seen someone like us stand up like that and win." A teacher in Texas wrote, "My students are talking about Congress for the first time. They see themselves in Jasmine Crockett." A retired veteran in California commented, "I may not agree with her politics, but I respect her courage. That's what America is supposed to be about." The backlash against Johnson grew. Petitions circulated, demanding accountability. Editorials called for a new kind of leadership, one rooted in service, not self-preservation. The old guard felt the ground shift beneath their feet, the certainty of their power suddenly in question. Yet, as the headlines multiplied and the memes spread, something deeper was happening. The conversation was changing. People weren't just talking about a viral moment, they were talking about what it meant. About who gets to speak, who gets to lead, who gets to define the future. Crockett's response had become more than a comeback. It was a spark, igniting questions that had simmered for generations. But beyond the headlines, this moment sparked a deeper conversation about who we are as a nation. In the days that followed, Jasmine Crockett's words echoed far beyond the walls of Congress. She didn't just win a debate, she reframed the entire conversation. When asked about the confrontation, she didn't gloat or attack. Instead, she spoke with the same calm conviction that had carried her through the storm. "This was never about me," she said. "It's about what we choose to value as a country. Do we reward arrogance, or do we honor dignity? Do we serve our egos, or do we serve each other?" Her message resonated because it was bigger than politics. It was about the daily battles fought by millions of immigrants who work twice as hard for half the recognition. Women who are told to be quiet, young people who are told to wait their turn. Crockett's story became a mirror, reflecting the struggles and hopes of a nation still wrestling with its own identity. She reminded America that dignity is not something granted by the powerful, it's something claimed by the courageous. You don't have to be in Congress to stand up for what's right, she told a crowd of students. You don't have to have a title to make a difference. Every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you lift someone up instead of tearing them down, you are shaping the future of this country. Crockett's journey, forged in adversity, became a testament to resilience. She spoke of her parents' sacrifices, of the teachers who doubted her, of the doors that were slammed in her face. But she also spoke of hope, the hope that comes from refusing to accept less, from believing that justice is possible, from knowing that every voice matters. America is not perfect, she said, but it is ours to shape. Every generation gets to decide what kind of country we will be. Her words inspired a new wave of activism. Young people registered to vote in record numbers. Community leaders organized town halls, using Crockett's story as a rallying cry. Families gathered around dinner tables, talking about what it means to stand up for dignity, to demand justice, to believe in hope, even when the odds are long. Crockett's example became a blueprint for courage. She showed that you can face down hate without becoming hateful, that you can answer arrogance with grace, that you can meet power with truth. She reminded the nation that service is not about self-promotion. It's about lifting others up, about leaving the world better than you found it.
And in that lesson, people found themselves. They saw their own struggles reflected in hers, their own dreams validated by her victory. They realized that the fight for dignity and representation is not just for the few. It's for everyone who has ever been told they don't belong. As the dust settled, one thing was clear. The future belongs to those who stand tall, even when the world tries to tear them down. So, when Mike Johnson attacked Jasmine Crockett's career, he thought he could silence a rising voice. Instead, he ignited a movement. In just 30 seconds, Crockett didn't just defend herself. She redefined what it means to lead with dignity, to answer hate with truth, and to show the world that real power comes from standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a turning point, a reminder that the old playbook of arrogance and exclusion is no match for the courage of those who refuse to back down. Crockett's story is proof that when you stand tall, when you speak your truth, you don't just survive, you inspire others to do the same. If you felt seen, if you felt empowered, if you believe that America is strongest when every voice is heard, then this is your moment too. Don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, share this story, and join a community that believes in justice, representation, and the power of truth. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And together, we can build a future where dignity always triumphs over hate. Because the next time power tries to silence truth, it might just be your voice that changes everything.